If you've spent any time at all in a gym, you have definitely heard the saying, it's not how much you lift, it's how you lift it. Well, today, we're going to put that old school wisdom to the test and see if it actually holds up to modern science. Let's get into it. And look, this idea isn't new. It was famously championed by absolute legends like Arnold Schwarzenegger. For Arnold, lifting weights wasn't just a physical thing. It was completely mental. He talked all the time about visualizing the muscle, feeling every single fiber contract, creating that powerful connection between his mind and his body. And honestly, that philosophy has been a cornerstone of bodybuilding for decades. But let's be real. Is this just bro science, something that sounds cool but doesn't actually do anything? Or is there a real, measurable advantage to focusing like that? Is the mind-muscle connection a myth? Or is it a secret weapon for unlocking more growth? That's exactly what we're here to find out. So here's our game plan. We'll start by breaking down what the mind-muscle connection really is. Then we'll jump into the science of how your brain actually talks to your muscles. We'll look at the actual studies that put this to the test and compare it to the just lift heavy approach. And then the best part, we'll give you a practical toolkit and a smart strategy to use in your very next workout. Okay, so what did Arnold actually mean by this connection? Well, in sports science, this whole concept has a name. It's called an internal focus of attention. Now, that might sound a little complicated, but the idea behind it is actually super simple. An internal focus just means you're directing all of your mental energy onto the target muscle while you're doing an exercise. So let's say you're doing a bicep curl. You're not just thinking about getting the dumbbell up. You're focusing on the bicep itself. You're trying to feel it shorten, feel it squeeze, feel it lengthen on the way down. You're making the contraction the main event. And this isn't some kind of mystical gym voodoo. It's pure biology. Every single time you move, there's this high-speed conversation happening between your brain and your muscles. The really good news is you can actually learn to make that conversation way clearer and a lot more effective. Here's a super simple breakdown of how it works. Step 1. Your brain's motor cortex sends out a command, something like, hey, lift that weight. Step 2, this command shoots down your spinal cord as an electrical signal through your nerves. And finally, step 3, the signal reaches your muscle fibers, telling them to contract and get to work. The mind-muscle connection is all about making that first command from your brain louder and clearer. Now, this is where it gets really cool. The idea of motor units. Your muscles are made of all these fibers that are grouped together, and each group is controlled by one single nerve. The best way to think about it is like a room full of light switches. When you lift a weight, your brain flips on just enough switches to get the job done. But when you use an internal focus, you can consciously learn to flip on more of those switches, recruiting more muscle fibers to do the exact same lift. Okay, so a better signal means more muscle fibers are firing. The theory sounds good, right? But does that actually lead to more muscle growth in the real world? Let's move from theory and see what the research actually says when this is put to the test. And boom, here it is. This is from a landmark 2018 study by the hypertrophy expert Brad Schoenfeld. He took 2 groups and had them work out for 8 weeks. He told one group to just, lift the weight, but the other group, they were coached on using the mind-muscle connection. The results were just insane. The mind-muscle group saw 12.4% bicep growth. That's nearly double the 6.9% from the other group. But wait, here's a really crucial detail. That same study found no significant difference in quad growth between the 2 groups. So what gives? Well, it probably has to do with how much control we have over different muscles. Our brains just have a more dialed-in connection to the muscles in our arms and hands, the ones we use for fine motor skills. The bigger muscles in our lower body, the ones we use for just walking around, are a lot harder to consciously isolate, especially if you're a beginner. And another huge piece of the puzzle is how much weight you're actually lifting. Research shows that focusing on the muscle gives you a huge boost in activation with light to moderate loads. Think anywhere up to about 60% of your 1-rep max. But when you start going really heavy, say above 80%, that benefit just disappears. Your brain's priority totally shifts. It's no longer about isolating a muscle, it's about survival. It's going to recruit every fiber it possibly can just to move that heavy weight. And this brings us to a really important crossroads in your training. See, there's a time to focus on feeling the muscle, and there's a time to just move the weight. It all comes down to your goal. Are you training for size, or are you training for pure strength? So, we've talked a lot about the internal focus for muscle growth. On the other side of the coin, you've got its opposite, the external focus. And this is all about performance. With an external focus, you're concentrating on the outcome, like thinking drive the barbell up to the ceiling or push the floor away from you during a squat. This is the focus that powerlifters and athletes use when they just need max strength and efficiency.
So why is that? Why is focusing away from the muscle better for strength? Well, the leading theory is something called the constrained action hypothesis. Basically, it suggests that when you focus on the outcome, you let your brain's automatic control systems take over and find the most efficient way to get the job done. If you start overthinking a specific muscle, you can't actually get in the way of that process and limit your own power. Okay, enough theory. We've established that the mind-muscle connection is the real deal, especially for building muscle with moderate weight. So how can you actually get better at it? Here are 4 simple science-backed techniques you can literally start using today.
First, before your main sets, do a few light reps to pre-activate the muscle. Really focus on just the contraction. Second, use touch. It sounds simple, but placing your hand on the working muscle gives your brain direct feedback. Third, slow down your tempo, especially on the negative, the lowering part of the lift. And fourth, squeeze. At the very peak of the contraction, pause and squeeze that muscle hard for a second or two. These little things will build a much stronger connection over time.
All right, we have covered the what, the why, and the how. Now let's put it all together. Because the smartest, most effective lifters out there don't choose between lifting heavy and feeling the muscle. They do both. The secret is to use a hybrid strategy. You start your workouts with your big, heavy compound lifts, your squats, your deadlifts, your bench presses. Here you use an external focus to build that raw foundational strength. Then, in the second half of your workout, you switch gears. You move to your isolation exercises, curls, extensions, raises. You lower the weight, switch to that internal focus, and work to maximize that targeted muscle growth.
I love this analogy. Think of it this way. Your heavy compound lifts are the sledgehammer. They're building the massive foundation of your physique. And your focused isolation work, using that mind-muscle connection, that's the chisel. That's what lets you sculpt all the details. You absolutely need both tools, and you need to know when to use each one to build your masterpiece. So the next time you step into the gym, I want you to ask yourself this question. Are you just moving weight, or are you actively building your body? The science is pretty clear. The most powerful tool you have for transforming your physique isn't on the weight rack. It's right between your ears. Thanks for watching.